started out on £260 a day. 4 months later, I went to £400 a day. 6 months after that, I was at £500 a day. But I've had contracts, shorter contracts, not 3-year contracts at £650 a day, £750, and even £1,000 a day. So the sky's the limit. To start to see your money just draining away, that's when it can really get in your head. And I know, because this has happened to me, even after years of contracting, your confidence just gets knocked. And I like to think of myself as a confident person, and I'm good at what I do. But I started to think, hang on, am I really good at what I do? Oh, is there a market for my skills out there? Maybe no one wants a monitoring consultant in the whole world.
Hello and welcome to Career Spotlight with Vanessa Ajamai. Another day and another great guest. Make sure that you stay tuned and remember to subscribe to hear amazing career journey stories. I have with me David Gerrish, who is the founder of IT Monitoring Consultancy Services. So David is someone that I've recently connected with on LinkedIn. So, hi, David.
Hi there. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. So we'll go straight into it. And so to give the viewers a bit of context, tell us a bit about the work that you do now.
So I'm an infrastructure monitoring contractor, so an IT monitoring contractor, and I've been doing that for about 26 years now. So I've been in IT about 30 years. So I had about 2 perm jobs and then went contracting, and I'm just about to secure my next contract. It's meant to be any day now. But as well as my normal IT contracting career, I also run the IT Contracting Academy. So that's where the idea is I empower IT professionals to avoid what I call the life sentence of permanent employment, so they can be true masters of their own destiny, so they can be contractors living a life they love. That's sort of my sideline business.
Great. So I'll split it into 2 halves, whereby we'll look at your sideline business first, and then we'll come back onto the IT monitoring, which you provide consultancy for. So what kind of inspired you to set this up then?
I was working at the London Stock Exchange, and I was there about 4 years. And sometimes I find, even as a contractor, you get stuck in a bit of a rut, and the work was not challenging me enough. And I like to be challenged. I like to fix problems and solve issues and, change the business, really change how companies work. And it just felt like that wasn't happening there so much. And I enjoyed the work, but I wanted to do something else. So I actually had a call with a mentor of mine, a sort of millionaire businessman guy. And he said, if I got you up on stage with a microphone, what would you talk about confidently, just like from the heart, not having to revise it or learn it? And I said, I'd really love to empower people to get into freelance contracting more, because I believe it's a great life. People can have more money, freedom, time, and confidence. And who doesn't want that? So I had this one free call with the guy, and then I wanted to have another call because I wanted to sort of flesh out, well, what does he mean? What should I do? And he was actually based in Marrakesh in Morocco. So I thought, well, rather than just booking another call with him, I'm going to fly to Morocco, because one of my core values, which is up on my wall just there, is travel. I just love travel. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a contractor. So I flew there to discuss things further and really sort of solidified and fleshed out what he was thinking I should do. And he said, why don't you set up some communities to help people, give more than you receive? But also, why not try and teach people? So create an online video course, for example. So that's what I did. I went to Marrakesh for a few days, padded out, fleshed out what I was actually going to do, and it really inspired me. And I came back, set up the groups, and created my video course.
Nice. So why would anyone want to go into contracting then?
I think it's a great life. Like I say, I've been a contractor 26 years. You can enjoy more money, I think more freedom. So I never say do it for the money. That's not, I think that's not the right driving force to do many things in life, but not to go contracting. I think for me is the freedom. So when I finish at a client, that's it. I've finished. I don't have to go through things like appraisals and all that sort of stuff you do as a perm employee. As I sort of say a lot in my groups, I'm the master of my own destiny. I can quit a contract. I've got the variety of lots of different contracts that I can do. I've done multiple contracts over the years, Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia. So I love that variety. But then when the contract's done, when the work is finished, I can switch off from that client and I don't have to worry about that at all. And I look to go and work somewhere else with new people, new places, new technologies, just a completely new environment. So I also think I think contracting is a great springboard into running your own business. So whether that's going to be a small side hustle that you've got, I think when you're running your own limited company, albeit as a one-man band, I think that's still good because it gets you to know, PAYE and national insurance and VAT and corporation tax and doing all, self-assessment returns, all that sort of stuff, expenses. So you just get a basic understanding of accounting and finances. And if you then want to go and hire someone else or create a little side business, then I think that's a good springboard into maybe something bigger. And I always think, a two-man company is created from a one-man company and a three-man company and so on. So that's how small companies form and evolve.
What are some of the disbenefits of contracting?
I think some people think the disadvantages of contracting are job security. So lots of people think they've got job security in a perm employed role. But I don't believe that's the case. I've been in plenty of companies where they started cutting their budgets and they got rid of permies as well as contractors. So it wasn't the myth that they're going to get rid of the contractors first. The last one that came in is going to be the first one out. They started cutting back on permies first, or permies and contractors at the same time. So I don't believe there is that job security in a perm job anymore. Lots of people I speak to will stay in a perm job for a few years. And I've had contracts that are 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. So I don't really see that stability issue as a real disadvantage. However, you can have gaps in between contracts. So that's a fact. So when you finish a contract, I always say start looking about 6 to 7 weeks before a contract finishes for your next contract. But I personally love to have time off in between contracts. I love to have 1 or 2 months off, especially if it's over the summer. It's great. You haven't got to worry about interviews and jobs and stuff like that. So that's really good. But when it becomes sort of 3 or 4 months and you start to see your money just draining away, that's when it can really get in your head. And I know because this has happened to me, even after years of contracting.
Yeah.
Your confidence just gets knocked. And I like to think of myself as a confident person and I'm good at what I do. But I started to think, hang on, am I really good at what I do? Oh, is there a market for my skills out there? Maybe no one wants a monitoring consultant in the whole world. I started to think things like that.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of pinch yourself and realize that, you are good, you have got good skills, you've got good experience. Maybe the market is quiet. There's things we don't understand about the market, obviously the financial situation around the world, but we don't know what companies are going through, why they're not hiring. So that's why as a contractor, you earn more money. So you put money away, you build up a war chest and you keep funds in the company and make sure you put money into lots of savings. And so if you are out of work for 6 months, you can cover that easily. And I will say try and have 6 months to a year's worth of savings put by.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Now that we're talking about money, I know you've mentioned that money shouldn't be like the key driver to go into contracting, but of course, we all love money. As with money comes with the freedom as well. What kind of rates could people look to negotiate within your line of work and contracting?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I mean, obviously it's quite variable. I started out on £260 a day. So we're talking 1996, this is. But
That's
£260 a
before
day.
I was born.
You make me feel terribly old. Yeah.
Sorry.
Edit this bit out. Yeah.
Oh.
So I started on 260 quid a day. But the point is, I was on 24 grand a year permanent salary or something like that. I've got the figures somewhere.
Yeah.
So I still jumped 131% pay rise. So more than doubled my pay. So £260 for my first contract. 4 months later, I went to £400 a day. 6 months after that, I was at £500 a day. Now, for me, my sort of ceiling rate, like the sort of maximum that I would generally on a long-term contract, is about £500 a day. And I like to think of that as a good yardstick for most IT people, for example. So there are exceptions to the rule, because when you're taking your first contract, you might take I've seen contractors take 150, £200 a day. Some clients obviously have got lower budgets.
Sure.
I see people who have got more skills, more experience, maybe in a real hot topic like cybersecurity or cloud or DevOps, and they might take a lower rate, but then once they've got a bit more experience, they'll get up to 500 and they might go beyond that. And then you've got project managers. Again, lots of project managers I know, maybe they're at that sort of 500 level. That's that good benchmark figure. But more experienced ones will get 650, 750, and I know program managers on 850 a day. So there is generally a sort of ceiling to each particular niche. So mine for long-term contracts is about £500 a day. But I've had contracts, shorter contracts, not 3-year contracts at 650 a day, 750, and even £1,000 a day. So the sky's the limit, depending on the niche, your skills, and your experience.
Yeah, I wanted to draw back in terms of finding yourself sometimes not being able to secure a contract in between ending one to go into another one. What are some of the reasons why, like, you think this happens?
Well, obviously, there might not be any roles out there, so that's one thing. And like I say, I've been contracting 26 years, so the market goes up and down all the time. People sort of panic when something goes bad, or IR35 or Brexit or COVID. There's all these things, I've been through, again, probably before you were born. Market crashes and rises, and that's just the nature of business and the economy.
Sure.
So there might not be the roles available. Obviously, when business is booming, then companies are investing in a lot more projects, and therefore want contractor resources. But if you're not getting a contract straight away, then there's various things. I'll try and think of a few of them. I always compare it to like the legs of a table. So you've got to have sort of decent skills, maybe a certification. They're things I can't sort of help people with. Skills, experience, certifications. Your CV is obviously very important, because the mission of your CV, whether you like a CV or not, is to get you an interview. That's all you want to think of it as. It's your mechanism to get past a recruiter, get you an interview, make sure the client likes the look of you on paper. So your CV is going to be important. Your LinkedIn profile, more and more these days, recruiters, but especially hiring managers, are checking us out on LinkedIn. So and think of it like yourself. If I look at someone's fantastic CV here, and then I go straight onto LinkedIn and just see this empty profile, or even worse, someone the other day, I couldn't find them on LinkedIn at all.
Okay.
That might just put a little, it might just ring a warning bell in my head. I don't know what it might do, but if it does something to someone and
Yeah.
stop them just putting your CV forward, then you've just created a bit of a block there. So you don't want to give any recruiter or hiring manager any ammunition to not put you forward or not pick you for interview. So you've got to have your CV on point, and you've got to have your LinkedIn profile on point, whether you're contracting or perm, looking for any job. But if you're going for £500 a day contracts or more, you've got to make sure those things are looking professional. And especially your LinkedIn profile is your storefront, isn't it? That's the shop window of you marketing yourself as a self-employed freelancer. So you've got to make sure it's attractive and isn't going to put people off. So there's a number of those factors that sort of about CV, LinkedIn. If it's a case of you're getting put forward for roles, but you're not getting chosen for interview, then it could be you're applying for the wrong things. Maybe there's always that possibility. If you're getting put forward for interviews, then you're having the interviews and you're not getting offers, then I always think, well, that your CV's done its job, your LinkedIn profile's done its job.
Yeah.
But then it's down to your skills and experience. Maybe sometimes there's a mismatch. You got to always realize and recognize that there's a mismatch. Sometimes I've had plenty of interviews in the past where once I got to the interview, because you only get a job spec that's got 4 lines in it sometimes.
Yeah.
You have no idea what the role really is. And so it's only when you speak to the hiring manager, you realize, oh, that role, there might have been a job spec that actually had 100 lines on it. And you realize they're actually after 4 people and they just want you for this bit. So that's why I always say to people, don't get put off by a large job spec, because they might want multiple people. Superman can't do the whole thing. They'll actually hire 4 people for that. But if you get through to interview, so there might be a mismatch. They just don't want your skill set. They might want someone with more experience. I've had it because I'm so old. Thank you, Vanessa. But they want someone with less experience. So they have this view that they can't afford me. They haven't even asked me. They haven't even offered me. They haven't said, oh, Dave, would you do it for £300 a day? Because maybe I might do that. They've just assumed, I'm overqualified and therefore not wanted me for the role. There could be just a cultural, my face doesn't fit type thing, or I'm not going to fit into their team if they just think Dave's a bit, talks too much, or, or whatever, something where there's just not that click, not that connection. Or it could be your confidence is low, which I do see a lot with permies, employed people going for contract roles. That's probably their biggest fear, is they're not used to having as many interviews as I have. I might have 4 or 5 interviews in a space of a couple of weeks every 6 months or something, so I'm a lot more confident in interviews because I'm confident in what I know. I'm confident in what I don't know. And I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to try and cover that up in any way. And I feel like I'm interviewing them as well. I really feel like it's got to be a 2-way thing. There's got to be a connection. And I really want to do this role. I want to work with this person, want to work for this company, and I want that company on my CV. So it comes down to interview technique and confidence, which, I do coaching calls on things like that as well.
I wanted to touch on being too qualified. What is that all about? Like,
I don't know really, because I've definitely been turned down for a role. An agency has said they think you're too senior for this role.
Yeah.
But they hadn't said to me, I think they put me forward at a role, at a rate. So they were willing to pay that rate. I don't understand, because if I was put forward at 500 and they're saying I'm overqualified, then they're getting a bargain for £500 a day, aren't they? Or if it was, maybe they're thinking I'm going to demand more money, but they didn't even have a conversation. But again, we only know half the story, don't we? Because if we're talking with a recruiter and the end client is here, we're not talking directly to the end client apart from our interaction at interview. So we're only listening to what the recruiter says. And as I always say, there's good recruiters and bad recruiters, you know. But I always say even a bad recruiter can get you a decent contract or a decent job. So you've got to be respectful and work with them. But yeah, I don't understand it, to be honest. Yeah. At least if they said, yes, we want you, but it's going to be this pay. You know, if I said, no, I'm going to be a bit of a diva and I want £600 a day, I can understand because they've got a budget of 300. You know, I've turned down a job before that was in Manchester for £300 a day. And I knew the guy well. He knew that I could do the job really well. But he just said, yeah, I think we're after someone a bit more junior because our budget literally is 300. And I just said, well, I can't travel to Manchester and take the hit on expenses and still have money left out of the £300 a day. Not enough, you know.
With permanent roles, I know sometimes I've heard loads of people saying that London can be way more competitive. From your experience, would you say that's the same with like a lot of contract roles?
I mean, I don't know the stats, but I would say
Yeah,
there's, you know, obviously there's more population in
yeah,
London. You know, the reason I live just south of London, just outside the M25, I chose that as a location when I used to live in London for 15 years in Islington, loved it.
yeah.
And then, you know, you get a family and you just think, well, you basically got to make that decision. Are you going to stay in London or are you going to move out? And so, you know, I decided to move out of London. But again, one of the key points for me was if I'm moving out of London, where do I want to go? And it was going to be within an hour's commute of London because I just knew lots of the roles I'd had in the past were London based. And I just thought I can get to the South Coast, I can get to the M4 corridor, and I can also get to anywhere in London within reason. So therefore it is a massive attractor of talent, of course. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's lots of talent, you know, in the north and spread around, and obviously these days a lot more working from home type remote roles, but definitely in the past everyone would just swarm to London. The first thing I did when I left university, go and move to London.
Sure. How do you see the future of contracting?
So like I said, the contracting market has gone up and down, you know, like the Big Dipper, like the economy has and everything else. And you know, I've heard in my groups, which is very sad, that people have gone away from contracting, gone back to perm roles when they don't want to. That's what really hurts me, is like they've gone to a role that they don't really, you know, it's like their shoulders slump. They don't want to do it, but they just feel like they've been beaten down by IR35 is the big one, of course. I know lots of people that have just packed up their limited companies, closed down their limited companies, gone back to perm work. Some people have just gone to Europe or elsewhere abroad and still doing IT work, but just in a different country, you know, because they know it's just not been affected by IR35 or by the current economic conditions here. So people have gone to Australia. I know people working in Europe, for example. And some people, again, which makes me sad, have just gone out of the industry, you know, whether it's IT or project management or anything related to IT. And they've gone into something completely different, which is great if that's your passion in life, to, you know, be a musician or whatever it is, of course.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it just because this industry is having one of the down dips, then that's obviously very sad. And yeah, I don't like to see that. I think the contracting market will improve though, because I think the market always auto corrects. It does correct itself over time. I've seen that, you know, because I'm so old.
Oh, now you're just
No, I'm
digging
joking.
it.
I'm just playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, things like IR35 didn't help, of course. Then, you know, we had Brexit, IR35 and COVID all within a couple of years. So that definitely hit people. But with IR35, for example, you know, I worked, you know, 4 years at the London Stock Exchange, limited company, you know, very good in that sense. Then they rehired me for a shorter project, 3-month project. And they said to me, you know, the rate will be the same, all that sort of stuff. I knew the work I was going to be doing. So I was going to be straight in to help them on a 3-month piece of work. Then sort of at the last minute, they said, oh, by the way, this is inside IR35. And I'm like, why is this inside IR35? Because the role is not inside IR35. And I think all the work I do is outside IR35 forever. All the work I've ever done, right? Because the whole point is companies hire me to come in and fix their monitoring systems, for example, or improve their monitoring. If they knew how to do it, they wouldn't be hiring me to do it. You know, they don't come and say to me, right, Dave, do this, 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 and this. They want me to bring my skills and expertise to the table. But you know, I've heard people in various companies, you know, high up senior members of the company saying that, not the stuff, this is just any company, just saying that these companies just don't want to take the risk. So they have this blanket ban approach, you know, which people have heard in the media, where the companies just say, we're not going to be doing any outside IR35 roles. So they're not going to determine whether it's inside or outside properly. They're just going to wash their hands of the whole situation and just class everything as inside. So it's not that the roles are inside, they're just blanket banning and basically just not running the risk of any investigation by HMRC, because the liability is down to them as the end client and they just don't want to take the risk. So I think it's absolutely inherently, fundamentally unfair to be working on an inside IR35 role where we're paying apprenticeship levy, employers' national insurance, and employees' national insurance. Why are we paying two? I can't be the employee and the employer. I just think it's ridiculous, these deductions. And then we've got umbrella fees as well. So, you know, the plethora of umbrella companies that just sort of sprang up when IR35 came out, loads of them, you know, just completely unregulated, most of them, and just taking that £25 a week off everybody, whilst people like me have got a limited company and you're still paying accountancy fees. So so that's definitely unfair, but I do see a light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense that I see more and more outside IR35 roles coming onto the market. Therefore, more and more clients are being educated by choice or whether by forced to be educated, because I know lots of hardened contractors, seasoned contractors like myself, who've just said, no, I'm not doing an inside IR35 role. So they're waiting for the outside IR35 roles. Therefore, by definition, the clients are not getting the full talent pool that is out there for whatever niche that is, like Java, for example. So if you're a Java developer, you're going to get some good talent in that pool, of course. But if there's a whole group of people over here waiting for outside IR35 roles, you're missing out on that talent. So the sooner you can get these determination statements created and really get your heads around IR35 and determining things as being outside, you're going to open yourself up to a much wider, bigger talent pool.
For the viewers who may be wondering, what is this IR35? Is basically kind of a new policy that was implemented a couple of years back, and employers now need to make a determination whether a contracting role is in or out. And from my understanding, the key change or element is, once that determination is made, if you're classified as inside IR35, then you have to use an umbrella company as opposed to being able to use your limited. And so you can do additional research, but obviously there's loads of implications which David was talking about and going through. So, and it's also, the determination is with the role and not with the person.
I mean, IR35 has been, I think when it first came in, I was working at Bupa. So that was, it was years ago, probably before you were born.
No.
So it came in a long while ago, initially. But back then, what people like me would say is, I mean, the rules were obviously not concrete back then. But basically, I was doing the work. I was determining the work I was doing, and the responsibility was on the contractor to decide the determination. So I would decide the work I was doing. I would also have a website. I would try and do multiple clients throughout the year so that I'm not just working for one client for 3 years like a sort of disguised employee. Yeah, I'm working for multiple clients. I'm basically running myself like a small consultancy, right? Which is, I believe, how it should be. And that then changed, because instead of it being me determining that status, it was then passed to the end client. And so that's where they're like, hang on a second, what happens if we get this wrong?
Sure. Yeah. Cool. So let's have a walkthrough of what your career journey has been like.
How long have you
The
got?
a high level view.
So I started out actually. So I left university, Leeds University, fantastic university, and went to work for a company called SD Sycon in London. So that was fantastic. Got a house in London and worked there for a few years. So I started off as like a coder, basically, so programming. And that company, I think, was sort of taken over by EDS. Now, EDS was a big US company, formerly, I think, created by Ross Perot. People have to Google that to see who this guy is, but big American company. And I just remember I was just going through the motions of working every month and earning money, and the money would just go down to zero, and then I'd get paid, and it would just go. That was just a cycle. I was just spending all the money, renting in London. I didn't have enough money to save. I had enough money to do things you do when you're that age, but not enough money to save or put down a deposit for a house, for example. And I remember, one project, I was absolutely, busting my butt to try and get this project done, working 13-hour days, working way longer than you ever do as a contractor, for example. And my boss promised me that I would get a bonus if we completed this work, working Saturdays, Sundays. I think I did 14 days on the trot, at least 12-hour days every day for 14 days. I was a bit like a zombie after it. It was really tiring. But my boss promised me a bonus. So after all this work was done, I then, inquired about the bonus. And I basically found out that my boss had basically just lied to me, because he denied all knowledge. He just denied that the conversation ever happened. And the thing that really got me was that hurt me more than just him saying the conversation didn't exist, was the fact that my dad was terminally ill at the time. Right? He knew my dad was terminally ill at the time. So, I don't hold many grudges in life, but I think that's a despicable thing to do, to promise me a bonus. It's not his money, it's the company's money. And then to just, go back on that promise. So that was one key turning point in my life where I just felt like I'm not going to be pushed around. So I took them to court. So I took EDS to court, that's quite scary. Because you're facing a big American company, and your boss in a courtroom, and but I won the case. So all I wanted was to be paid what was due to me.
Yeah.
So that I left that company, of course, and I took another job, a perm job, and that was in Islington, and that was fantastic. Just a complete breath of fresh air. And I was talking to someone today, actually giving them a coaching call, saying that if you're in a job where you feel like you're undervalued, you might be underpaid as well, but you're just not excited by it, you don't have to go contracting as your next step. For me, that perm job was a perfect next step, because I got I can't remember, 35% pay rise, I think, but I was working in a small company rather than this big American company. You had to do everything yourself, plug the computers in, everything. You had to do it all. but it was great people, great social life, and I got some great new skills, and that's where I got into IT monitoring. Um, so that was good, but then I think my dad actually passed away at that point, and again, it was that second thing in my life where I just sort of took stock of where I was, and I remember thinking that other people joining the company are joining on more money than me. And I don't begrudge people earning more money than me, of course. And you have to pay people based on their skills, their experience, and also to be able to attract them into a company. But I was training people up that were on more money than me, and I was doing that job already. And I also knew that I was getting hired out when working for a consultancy. I was getting hired out at £800 a day, for example. And I just thought, I need a little bit of a pay rise here, and so I asked for a pay rise. I always believe if you don't ask, you don't get. And I was sort of told, yeah, maybe you'll get a pay rise in a couple of years, or salaries will sort of level out. And I just thought, a couple of years, that's just not, that's not soon enough. And so I made a point of saying I'm not happy with this, because they had a policy of, if you're not happy, come and tell us. And so I did. And I finally just decided to look for something else. And like I say, I looked for another role and got my first contract, £260 a day.
So what was your motivation for studying computer science at Leeds?
Oh, well, I mean, as a kid, I grew up playing video games. I got an Atari 2600 console when I was about 10 years old. You're gonna have to Google that, because so I loved arcade games. I loved going to the arcades. And then a few years after getting my Atari, I then got a ZX Spectrum computer, a little personal home computer, one of the first sort of home computers that you could get back then. And of course, I loved playing games like my friends, but I started to do basic programming, just a little bit of programming. And I was never a whiz at it or anything, just little programs and stuff. And that just got my brain going. And I've always been quite sort of logical. I like maths and things like that. So I've been definitely more logical than artistic. Luckily, my son and daughter, they've both got artistic streaks in them as well, which they take from their mum, and they get their sort of maths logical side from me. So hopefully that's a good combination. But I think I joined like a computer club at school, but I was actually advised at school not to take O-level, GCSE computer studies, because I think it might have meant I would have to drop French, for example. So even the computer studies teacher said, take French, because he said, if you love computers and you get into computers, you could take it at A-level or do it at university if you want to. You don't have to do it at GCSE O-level, at the time for me. So that's what I did. I basically just carried on with my studies, did my A-levels, still didn't know what I wanted to do. But I then decided I wanted to do computer science at university. So I applied and got to Leeds University. Yeah.
Nice. You mentioned your family. How have you managed like balancing work life and family life?
Well, I think as a contractor, it's a lot easier because, like I finished my last contract the end of November. So I've had the whole of December off, which is just, I love having December off. It just makes Christmas so much less stressful. I just remember when I was in perm jobs, or even in a contract when I had to work right up until Christmas Eve, I just haven't got time for buying presents and all that sort of stuff. And, and so with younger kids, it's just nice to be there for the whole of December. And that's why I like it if I have time off in the summer, because if it ties in with their school holidays, then that's great. A couple of years ago, we went to America for like 3.5 weeks. So that was great. So I like to maximize the amount of travel I can do and spend time with them, of course. The only time it's been hard for me as a contractor is when I had to work away from home. So I had a period of time when I was out of work, and I didn't know, again, is the what's happening to the market? Is it my skill set? Is it the market is just quiet? And there were roles coming up, but I wasn't getting the offers, or the budget was getting stopped. So I took a role that was further away, and that meant I had to go and travel, 4.5 to 6 hours up north and stay there during the week. And the work was great. The people I worked with were great, but I don't like being away from family and home, especially when your kids are young as well, and it put more stress on, my relationships with, wife and kids, and just made me more irritable, because when you're driving 9 hours back on the motorways, I think I was about 4 or 5 motorways I had to deal with, I mean, I knew all the service stations by, in order. It was just, and your back would hurt from sitting in the car for so long. It was just, and I felt like I came home and I was so tired that I just want to just do nothing all weekend. And then bang, it just felt like I was getting on the motorway again to travel up there. So that's when I don't like it, when you have to do those sort of roles.
Sure. In terms of coding now, why is it a handy skill to have as an IT professional, basically?
I think coding's a great skill for anyone to learn, regardless of IT professional. I know my kids have done it as part of their schoolwork, and I just think, why I didn't get to do that when I was at school. But I think it's great for logical thinking, for analysis, for finding and detecting errors and fixing errors, solving problems in general. Also patience, which I don't always have a lot of, but it teaches you patience, because you can't rush something. If something's not working, you've got to get down to why it's not working. So I think that's really good. I think various studies as well back this up, that coding is very good for problem solving in lots of spheres of life. But if you're going to get into IT, even if you're not going to be a coder, I think it's good to have that coding mentality and being able to solve problems in a stage by stage, piecemeal manner.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so is there like a day in the life of what an IT monitoring consultant looks like, as well as what it's all about?
I don't know about a day, but
Yeah.
I mean, as a monitoring consultant, what I do is I usually go into companies and either try and improve their monitoring or set up their monitoring, and that basically is ensuring that the entire IT estate is monitored effectively. So that means that any faults that occur within the IT environment, which is obviously most of the business these days, those faults are picked up as incidents. So some sort of alert, and then there's an incident raised. And the idea of that is that we capture those faults and incidents before it affects the business. So that could be the monitoring of servers, computers, networks, databases. That could be storage, that could be applications, that could be websites, it could be anything at all that makes up the business. So if you're working for a bank, for example, there's trading functions, there's all the IT functions, there's the business, there's a multitude of things there, components, and you want to make sure they're all working. So if there's a completely full disk drive on one computer, if that computer is critical, we want to make sure we get an alert coming out of that. We trust that alert, so we believe it. It's not a red herring. And we make sure that incident is logged in the system, so there's visibility to all the other stakeholders in the company or in the department that need to know about it. And then it can be resolved, and we make sure we put steps in place to make sure that doesn't happen again, or that risk is mitigated again.
Sure.
So my job is generally to help companies set up those systems so they trust their monitoring, basically.
What are the type of skills that would be required to do well in your role?
I think you've got to have a logical brain, like I said, having that
Yeah.
sort of, I've got that, definitely that maths logical mindset. Um, I'm very methodical as well. You know, if I have a plan to do anything in life, I write down 5 steps or 10-step process. So I'm very logical in that sort of thing. So logical and methodical. You've got to be curious, because I've worked in companies where they were setting up a trading system and they wanted me to monitor that. And I didn't know what that was.
Mm.
That's that trading system. But I got the guy to write out on a massive whiteboard how the trading system interacted with the rest of the infrastructure of the organization. So he'd say, right, we're taking a data feed here from the US for pricing information here. That comes into a Sybase database here, and then it moves to an Oracle database here. Then it comes into the UK systems here. So he drew this big spider's web of how everything came together. So I just kept asking, well, what if that fails there? You know, what happens if what if the pricing from America doesn't come in? You know, does that ever happen? And he would say, if it doesn't come in, that's terrible, because that means our UK pricing on our trading system is going to be inaccurate. So therefore, we need to monitor that. So it was about identifying all these critical aspects, some that were monitored and some that just weren't monitored yet, and making sure they were monitored. So passionate about fixing problems as well. So if you've got problems already in the environment, you want to be able to fix those problems, set up monitoring to capture those problems again in the future. But ultimately for me, it's about like delivering value to organizations. I want to deliver value to organizations, to people. You know, it's like, it all comes down to people, really, isn't it? You want to help people out and make their lives easier. And being able to see the bigger picture of how situations can either help companies or hinder companies if things go wrong.
Yeah, thank you. What are some of the key emerging trends or technologies that you're kind of keeping an eye on within IT, and how do you see it impacting businesses in the future?
I mean, the biggest thing obviously is cloud, really, at the moment, or for the last couple of years. But as I was on a webinar recently, or listened to a webcast the other day, I think it was by Micro Focus, who I've worked with in the past. They said that lots of their clients, I think, had been, you know, that everyone rushes to the cloud, like, oh, the cloud, you know, and in reality, it's just another data center. It's just not your on-prem data center. So you can't just think of cloud as my problems are solved. It's in the cloud now, this magic cloud, you know. And the data is safe, or, you know, your servers are monitored. There may be some inbuilt monitoring by your cloud platform provider to make sure those systems are up and running. But if you've got applications and databases and everything else running on them, you still need to make sure they're monitored effectively. So you just got to not think that having stuff in the cloud solves all your problems. So cloud is big. Big data, so data lake technology. Again, I've seen systems where they just push all their data into a tool, but that tool is just going to be a big muddy data lake if you can't extract the meaningful information out of it that you want. But also, you've got to make sure that you're putting good data into that lake, and not just lots of noise, you know, whether on a monitoring side of things, like loads of noisy alerts or alerts that are wrong. You've got to make sure you clean up your estate first before you start populating the data lake. Otherwise, it's going to be pointless trying to extract meaningful AI type information out of that. So that's a big trend, is the AI side of things. The downside is lots of companies are selling software based on cloud, AI, big data, but you've still got to fix some of these underlying problems. You can't just adopt the top level. That's a nice way to look at things, but you've got to make sure the underlying infrastructure and alerts are all fixed first.
What would you tell like your younger self with what you know now, and what are like some of the lessons learned, basically?
I mean, some lessons learned are, it sort of sounds negative. I was going to say, like, companies primarily will look after themselves. And I don't mean that in a bad way, like, you know, just because this bad boss lied to me back in the past and I took the nasty man to court, you know, 'cause I know there's good companies out there, and some people, you know, would love being an employee and are treated well by their companies. You know, like I did in my second job. You know, I was treated very well. They just then didn't want to give me any more money, which is fine. So we part ways. But yeah, realize the company is there to make business. They're not there to give you the best life possible. I don't mean that in a bad way, because they may pay you handsomely and give you lots of training and send you into different countries and give you a good career. So that is possible.
Mm.
But just make sure you are living life true to your own values too. So some of my values, again, up on the wall, are travel and, you know, seeing the world. So for me, having a perm job, there's a conflict there, because I don't want to be having 23, 24, 25 days holiday. You know, when I first started contracting, when I didn't have a family, I worked 6 months and traveled 6 months. And I did that, I think, for 2 years running. So definitely, the other thing I'd say is, if a boss in your job tells you to speak out if you're unhappy, is to make sure you definitely do that. Right. So you might not get the opportunity to do that. So, you know, but if you do, then make sure you do voice your opinion. I voiced my opinion and didn't get a pay rise still. So what you've got to realize then is the ball is back in your court. And again, it's down to you to take action. So take the opportunities in life that present themselves to you at those key moments in your life, because you don't want it to be the time when you're lied to by your boss and you take them to court. You know, you want to make those decisions before it gets to that point. You don't want to get to the point where your dad's terminally ill and your dad passes away for you to go, oh my God, I want to go and do something different. You know, you want to make those choices, you know, without those big life decisions in the way. But yeah, decide what your passions are in life, what your core values are. So do a values determination test. I recommend everybody does that, a values determination test. That's very good for working out what you really want out of life, and really just follow your dreams to live a great life.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much, Dave, for agreeing and coming to share such amazing insights with the viewers. So it's been really great. Thank you.
Total pleasure.